in the future. But you see, there are helium-3, very sufficient helium-3 resources on the lunar surface. Although today it is still too early to talk about collecting the helium-3 at this stage.
Earth's benefit, but the resources, the reserves there could power Earth for centuries.
Maybe next century, maybe later. So if in the future, theoretically speaking, it is possible for Earth to master the technology of controlled fusion power. If we can get or master the technology of controlled fusion power, it will be the completely green energy resources for the human being. And you know that, as you mentioned, the helium-3 on the lunar surface can be used for thousands of years for human beings. So that is the reason why the lunar exploration is so meaningful today.
And that could certainly help address the climate and energy crises that we are facing today on Earth.
But I still should emphasize that's still too early to talk about this now.
It's a blueprint. It's a long-term goal.
It's a vision.
Yeah, it's a vision.
So about 5 minutes left for the second ignition of the second stage. So we will conduct the lunar orbit insertion very soon. So you may notice at this coaster phase, we also have the control. You can see that although it is not the real video stream, but the 3D animation, as I mentioned, is driven by the real data, by the real parameters. So you can see that the attitude or the direction of the combination of the spacecraft is still very, very stable because we have the attitude control engines on board our second stage of the Long March 5.
Sure. We're now about 24 minutes into this mission, the Chang'e 6. This is a milestone mission as it will mark the first time that a spacecraft will make a landing, hopefully, a soft landing on the far side of the moon and bring samples back.
We have a measure to adjust the duration of the coaster phase to have different choices of the launch window. So this is also a key technology we've already mastered several years before. And with this help, we can extend the launch window. And as I mentioned, you know, as we've already discussed, you may remember just now, we already discussed the influence of the weather. There are all kinds of things that can influence the possibility of a launch. So to extend the launch window, we master this technology.
Right. So for humanity to further explore the moon, it's not only for us to get a better understanding of the planet, but also for us to go deeper into the universe. For example, maybe perhaps one day in the future, the moon could be used as a launch pad.
Yes, quite right.
For our journey to Mars.
Yes, and according to the analysis of many experts, it will be cheaper. You know that although I don't agree that we human beings today we should colonizing Mars. Until now, the human being has not mastered the necessary technologies to colonizing Mars. But I always support that the human being now, we should set up a permanent base on the Martian surface. It is very meaningful and also very important for us. You know that for this goal, you know, the most difficult thing or the most tough point for us is to have a sustainable or a low-cost transportation system between the Earth and Mars. And during this process, I think there are two things we should consider. The first one is the on-site resource utilization, either on the Martian surface or on the Earth. On the moon.
On the moon.
Yeah. So if we can utilize great, we can see the scene in
They all look very relieved,
relaxed,
and that's certainly a good sign for the mission, meaning the most
so
risky
now we are
part.
very close to the second ignition.
Right. You do have a long-term vision, Professor Yang. You were talking before we were able to understand the far side of the moon and build up a space there. You were thinking about building a camp, building a research base on Mars.
Yes, like that we done in Antarctic region. So you know that today we China already have more than maybe 4 or 5 stations in the Antarctic region, in the continent. But you know that it is also necessary for us to do the same thing on Mars. But to do this, you know that the cost of the transportation between the Earth and Mars is extremely expensive now. So what we should do now is to conduct all kinds of technical measures to reduce the cost greatly, remarkably, for this purpose. So the first step, maybe just what SpaceX have already done, we should also master the technology of reusable launch vehicle. And in the future, you know that today we already have many state-owned companies, and the private companies in China is now developing this technology.
Scientists and engineers at the Ground Control Center are looking relaxed than prior to the launch.
I believe they are also waiting for the ignition, the reignition.
Yeah. As we said, every minor step of the way is pivotal for the success of the entire mission.
Yep. As I mentioned, the coast phase will last for more than 10 minutes, quite long procedure.
Second stage ignition, the second
Reignition.
Reignition.
Okay, great. We heard the voice.
Another round of applause from the engineers.
Yeah.
On
So
Earth.
the second ignition, the second burn will last for several minutes.
Second stage boosts for second time.
So this is also called the lunar orbit insertion. You know that the parking orbit, the velocity is about 7.8 kilometers per second. But if you want to go to the moon, the velocity must reach to about 11 kilometers per second. So there is a great gap between these two velocities. So that is reason why we need the second ignition, just near the equator. So we utilize the second stage to conduct the second burn to have the translunar orbit insertion.
It's pretty fascinating to think that what's keeping scientists, engineers, and amateurs alike, keeping their passions is the uncertainty and the unknown of the vast reaches of the universe. There's just so much to explore.
Well, you know that the curiosity, I believe it is human nature for not only our engineers and scientists, but for all human beings. And also, I should emphasize that to study, to explore the universe is also even very, very important for us to know the destiny of human being. You know that why we conducted so much missions to study the history or evolution of the moon, because with only in this measure we can have a more precise prediction of the fate of human being in the future. So you know that after maybe 5 billion years, the sun will become a red giant, and at that moment the Earth is not habitable for human being. So we must know or have a better understanding, a better prediction of what will happen in the future.
Nothing is impossible. And just think about hundreds of years ago when scientist Galileo Galilei invented the space
astronomical
telescope, and we were able to have the first sight of the moon,
especially the craters on the moon.
Craters on the moon, and now the Chang'e 6 mission is bringing with it a payload from Italy, from scientists there. It really tells us how much humanity has, made leaps forward in our exploration, our passion, and our renewed interest in the moon.
As mentioned by our guest from Pakistan, so their CubeSat will have a very powerful function to take photos on the lunar orbit. So I believe that it is very beautiful, that's the photos of moon, and also very, very helpful for us. Although, it is impossible for us to enjoy the far side, the sightseeings on the far side of the moon. But with the orbiters, we can do this. And even today, for instance, the US has a probe called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. It can even take the pictures of the trail of the rovers on the lunar surface.
So thinking about the long-term goal, Professor Yang, I still want to mention the crewed missions to the moon, because we understand that now we are working towards that goal by 2030, and the U.S. has its Artemis program going on at the same time.
Yes, you know that Miss Wang Yaping, the first space teacher of China, also the first female to enter the China space station, are friends of we both. And she has expressed many times to major media of China, she hopes to walk on the moon in the future. So first, I press my best wish to her to fulfill this dream. And also, I should emphasize, this is another millennium dream for we Chinese. Yang Liwei has already fulfilled the first millennium dream of the Chinese people, and I believe that walking on the moon will be the second one.
Yeah.
So in the future, as you mentioned, we will have the plan to be scheduled before 2030, before the end of 2030, to have our first crewed mission to the lunar surface. But still, we must face, honestly speaking, many challenges during this process. First, we must have a more powerful launch vehicle, even much more powerful than this Long March 5 rocket.
Right. Earlier on, you mentioned the heavier payload for a crewed mission to the moon. Why is it so much heavier than an unmanned mission? Is it because it has to bring with it the life-supporting materials like water, food, for example, to really keep our astronauts alive and functioning well on the moon?
You know that we can have a comparison between the Shenzhou spaceship and the future manned spaceship to the moon. You see that the total mass of our Shenzhou spaceship is more than 8 tons. But you know the difference between Shenzhou spaceship and the spaceship to the moon is that for the spaceship to the moon, it must have much greater capability to change its velocity comparing with the Shenzhou spaceships. So that is reason why our Mengzhou, the next generation spaceship, if it goes to the moon, it will have a very huge fuel tank and have so much propellant. You know that the moon is a big celestial body, although it is much smaller than the moon, than the Earth. So when approaching the moon, we must deaccelerate or brake to conduct the lunar orbit insertion. And also, we need to go back to the Earth. All these procedures need a lot of propellant. So that is the reason why the Mengzhou spaceship is more than 26 tons. So you can see it's even only not include the lander, even the spaceship itself is 3 times heavier than our Chang'e 6 probe. So that is reason why we need another much more powerful rocket, actually speaking, a Long March 10 for this process.
It's heavier because it requires much more fuel to power the mission.
Yeah. So still the second stage is burning. After it is burned off, the probe, the combination of the second stage and our Chang'e 6 will enter the translunar orbit.
Right.
Great. So
Another
it's already shut down, as I mentioned.
Already shut down.
Yeah.
For
So
the
the next
second
critical
time.
step will be the separation between the rocket and the probe.
All right. And after that, we'll be awaiting the solar panel to open up.
Yeah. So this is viewed by the camera mounted on the second stage.
Well, Professor Yang, I know you are really a professional photographer as well,
Yeah.
taking pictures of the moon. What do you fantasize when you look at the moon from Earth?
Wow, you know that with the telescope, we can get more details of the lunar surface. I enjoy this, and also many of my foreign friends like it and endorse me on the social media. And also, you know that for system designer on spacecraft, we must be very familiar with the optical systems. So this is how I can master the necessary skills for study the optical systems. So we can see that on the right, top right is a 3D animation based, as I mentioned, driven by the real data. So still at this moment, we can see the dashed lines is the communication links between the ground station. Okay, beautiful.
And that was the separation
so
of
now
the rocket.
You can see the video is the rear part of the Chang'e 6. Actually speaking, is the orbiter. So we can see the cylindrical part of the probe is the biggest part is the orbiter.
So this certainly marks another important step in this mission. That's the separation of the rocket.
Yes.
And
so this is also another critical step, and then will be the unfolding of the solar panels. Both on the orbiter and on the lander, because they will fly independently several days later.
Yeah.
So we need the unfolding of the two pairs of solar panels.
And until these two sets of solar panels are opened up, that will mark the success of the launch mission.
Exactly. Moreover, we should also evaluate the accuracy of its initial orbit, because you know that only it is accurate enough we can have the possibility to conduct the successive procedures.
And I also want to talk about China's space station, the Tiangong. What kind of international cooperation is being showcased on the CSS?
I believe that our Tiangong space station is a very ideal place to conduct the international cooperation. So today we already have the joint experiments with other countries. And next step, we've already talked many times, will be the visiting of the foreign astronaut to our Tiangong space station. So
you know what, Professor Yang, when I see the scientists, engineers taking out their glasses, it means that they are really relieved to see how well the mission is progressing.
Yes, quite right.
And finally some smiles from these scientists there.
Okay, we just heard his voice that, as I mentioned, the orbital parameters has already been acquired. So, as I mentioned, the accuracy of the orbital parameters is also very critical for our mission.
Sure. Has the spacecraft established communications with the Magpie Bridge 2 at this moment?
No. At this moment, it's still too far from the Magpie Bridge 2. So at this moment, it still has the communication link between the Tianlian data relay satellite or with space tracking ships, such as Yuanwang series tracking ships on the Pacific Ocean. They are already in smile. So that means that the most risky part has already passed for the launch.
And they start talking and having some small chat over there.
Yeah.
It's a rewarding moment for the scientists.
Yeah. So I believe that we can see the big red screen soon.
Yeah.
It's our tradition.
Yeah, it is. It really is something that we're all looking forward to.
Yeah. Now you can see it's already more than half an hour now. So that is a very important feature for the launch of the Long March 5 or the Long March 3A series.
Right.
Because it needs a coaster phase that lasts very long.
And now let's hear some more insights from Mark McCorin, former senior advisor for science and exploration at the European Space Agency in the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining us on our program. Now, as we are both waiting for that big moment, the announcement of the success of the launch mission, what aspects of Chang'e 6 lunar mission are you most looking forward to?
Well, as a scientist, you know, it's an amazing thing to be able to go to the far side of the moon and bring samples back. It's very different from the near side of the moon, the piece of the moon we see all the time because of the way the moon is locked to the rotation of the Earth. It also will hopefully bring us some idea about the way that the moon was struck by these very large impactors, by asteroids. Early in the solar system history, billions of